the strategic plan slides or Caitlin's slides, they're in board packet.
Yeah, I don't have
Okay.
Something with wheels.
I don't know how to get them out of board packet, but you
Helmet.
share them with me.
Yeah, so Jason.
Excellent.
Right, Ethan?
Yeah.
Just now.
Okay, I will share that with you.
Great, thank you.
Oh, sure. Yeah. I'm glad you said something.
And I'm on the city. I don't have case.
I just chatted you Emma's.
Not in the skateboard project, I'm not affiliated.
Using the
with them.
ACSD webinar account though.
I am on
Okay,
the
so
Parks and Rec.
Send it there.
So
Okay.
they
Thank you for the
are
reminder.
sent to Parks and Rec, and we said, yes, you get our endorsement, as
ACSD
long as the
webinar.
school
Got
board
it.
endorses you, we're good to go. So that's where I'm like, I don't know, cause I'm still new. Hey, Steve.
Tricia.
Okay, I sent it to you. I don't know where Caitlin's is though.
Are we ready to get started here?
It's near the.
Yeah, right there, meeting materials.
So.
No, not that one.
There was
Yeah.
one of the pages in here where it was actually there. So, oh, those are the setbacks. Here.
I think it'll be pretty
So
far
it
down.
does go into the
These are all the pages from the
small
previous meetings.
soccer.
Yeah, there's 94 pages.
And
And it's the last one in board pack, the last attachment, or whatever, last document. We went past it.
At least here, where like the shed and.
There.
Yeah.
Skate parks.
Yeah, keep going up.
Two, that's the board.
No, it's not in there, it's right by the pool. It's not in the wetlands.
Right, no, the setback is.
A few pages ahead, but that's,
Oh,
I think if that's.
Yeah, I mean, it's not a
So
slush.
what happens is good. Click it. Estimated total cost.
Can I send it to her? I just sent it to the ACSD webinar.
That's what Will told me to do.
Oh, I thought that was the ID thing. He's also looking.
Yeah, I sent that one too.
This one?
Yeah, that's the one I just sent to the webinar. And I'm waiting for Caitlin to tell me which one to send.
Right. No, we say.
There it is,
that
presentation
we
shared with you.
bill, like, if they get the money, right?
We're the ultimate people and it's least.
Are we ready to start, Will?
Recording in progress.
I would like to call the Addison Central School District meeting to order. Today's date is May 22nd. The current time is 6:32 p.m. I do have one correction on the agenda under report of the superintendent. It should have been labeled as an action since we will be approving the appointments, but everything else is correct there. Okay, so the next order of business is to do introductions. So I would like to start with Will.
Will Hatch, Technology Director.
Steve Orzak, Mulberry.
Lindsay Hescock.
Mary Heather Noble.
Brian Bauer.
Joanna Doria.
Nicole Carter sitting in for Peter Burrows.
Trisha Allen.
Suzanne Buck.
Chip Malcolm.
Ellen Whelan-Weist. And Barbara Wilson. And then the folks from administration in the back. And
Heather Crowley, Executive Assistant.
Matt Correnti, Director of Finance and Operations.
Caitlin Steele, Principal of the high school, here as Director of Teaching and Learning.
excellent, thank you. The next,
Um,
I'm sorry, Jason.
Jason Chance, how's it going?
See, I've asked Lindsay to be my eyes, so as soon as she was doing her.
But I start going like this, I'm trying to
Yes.
go.
Thank you so much. Okay, the next order of business is time for public comment. First, we'll offer public comment for folks in the field or in the room. Please raise your hand and please limit it to 3 minutes. Is there anyone in the room that would like to make a public comment? Mary.
Hi, my name is Mary Slozar. I think most of you know me.
I wanted to come and talk with you all a little bit about family engagement. I heard in the last board meeting, Suzanne mentioned that the policy committee is gonna be revisiting the policy on family engagement. And I just wanted to raise with the full board that, this isn't just about putting a new policy in place and writing new words on a page or downloading something new from VSBA. This is a real cultural values, decision that I think the whole board should be really thinking about and considering and making a decision about what we care about on this issue as a school district and how we want to move forward with that. So I want to raise to your attention that the AOE actually has a toolkit and a self-assessment guide on family engagement built on decades of research showing that you can't improve schools without families, and laying out lots of great strategies. And I think really an awesome self-assessment tool for our school district to take a look at themselves and then step back and figure out what to do. So I'm happy to share that link with you all later. It's also in the link to include it in the CPAC event follow-up meeting that we forwarded along to you all too. I'm here in my capacity as a parent, community member, not in the CPAC, just to clarify. But thank you. I just, it's really important, and it's not just for the policy committee. This is a systems, culture, values discussion. Thank you. Thank you. Anyone else? Okay. Is there anyone participating on Zoom?
We have no attendees.
Okay. So then we will move on to the next agenda item, which is the recommendation to approve the minutes. There's, again, as was true last meeting, we have quite a bunch of meeting minutes to approve. So what I would like to do is recommend that we do them as a block, because it's so much easier in the tools that we have to be able to record it as a block, like we did last time. Is there any objections of doing it, Steve?
I have one comment, Chair.
Okay, I don't know which was first. Was it Steve or?
I saw them both sort of at the same time. I saw Steve first because he's in my,
Okay.
he's
so
in
I
my,
said Steve.
you know,
Thank
right
you.
close to me.
It's just a comment that the meeting on the 8th, I believe, was the one in Shoreham, correct?
Yes,
That was not a special meeting that I remember.
no, it wasn't.
And I couldn't copy, sometimes I print out, and I could not print out those minutes. I could print out everything else, but I could not print those out. So I just want to make sure that that doesn't get labeled as a special meeting. That was a scheduled, regular board meeting.
Right. And Steve.
I will once again raise my objection to approving these in block because, again, there are many members that were not here for certain meetings, and it has been tradition to abstain when you are not here to approve the meeting minutes.
Mary Heather and then Lindsay.
I will just say the approving as a block is for my ease, but I'm totally fine with recording, with doing individual motions. That's fine. So if we do want to make note of folks who have been absent and who would prefer to abstain, I'm fine with that. So if we need to do that, that's easy for me to do.
Okay, thank you. Lindsay?
Chip mentioned the May 8th meeting. I couldn't open it either. Last meeting, there was one set of meeting minutes that I couldn't open as well. I don't know, it was only, I don't have Word on my computer, so all the others were PDFs, so I don't know. I'm just raising that concern to make sure that they're all PDFs so that people can access them, please.
Yeah, and I did notice, and at first I had difficulty, but in my case, it actually downloaded the document as a Word document. So maybe that is the issue. If it's not a PDF, it doesn't behave the same. I did notice that it was labeled, the file was labeled as special meeting, but the header within the file was correct. And designated it as a regular board meeting. Was everyone able to actually review the board meeting minutes from the 8th?
Yes.
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 There's also a typo in the minutes, 5-3, the title for today's special meeting should be special meeting.
Okay, so let's, so then I guess let's go through them one at a time. So let's start with May 3rd. Can I have a motion to approve the minutes for May 3rd?
So moved.
I'll second.
All in, okay, so now is there any discussion?
So it's in our agenda that it's spelled incorrectly.
Yes,
That needs to be changed.
but not on the minutes, right? Any other discussion on the May 3rd minutes? If no other discussion, then I would like to approve the minutes. All those in favor of approving the May 3rd minutes, please respond by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions?
There are two people who weren't there. Two people were not there, so would they abstain?
Yes.
Should.
Any abstentions?
I don't know what we're voting
May
on.
3rd, May 3rd.
You should abstain.
I will abstain.
Yeah, as should you, Brian.
So we have two abstentions for the minutes. Okay, moving on to May 8th. Can I have a motion to approve the May 8th minutes?
I'll move to approve.
Yeah, second?
Second.
Any discussion? Thank you. All those in favor of approving the May 8th minutes, respond by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Okay, moving on, yes.
There were three people not in attendance. I'm not sure the proper protocol for,
Remote attendance, I think.
or
Yeah.
they were all,
They were all-
okay, so everyone was there for that one?
Everyone was there.
Okay,
Yeah.
sorry, excuse me. Shouldn't have said anything.
Excellent, okay. So now moving on to May 9th, may I have a motion to approve the May 9th meeting minutes?
So moved.
Second?
Second? Any discussion on the May 9th? Hearing none, all those in favor of approving the May 9th meeting minutes, respond by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Can you have? Okay, moving on to May 12th. Can I have a motion to approve the May 12th minutes?
So moved.
A second.
Second.
Any discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor of approving the May 12th meeting minutes, respond by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? And moving on to May 18th, may I have a motion to approve the meeting minutes?
So moved.
A second?
Second.
Any discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor of approving the May 18th minutes, respond by saying aye.
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 Any opposed? Any abstentions?
How many assumptions are there?
Three.
There were three. Okay, the minutes are approved. Thank you.
One last one,
Oh, there is?
the 18th.
Oh, I'm sorry. I thought I was.
That
That's
was
what
the
we just
18th.
did.
I thought
Oh,
that
I'm
was-
sorry, I have the 12th. My bad, I've got it all down.
Don't
Don't write it all down.
It's recorded if you don't.
I thought
My
I.
hand works faster than my brain.
Thank goodness for that. for
Okay.
all of our help.
The next is approval of the ACSD bills. I'd like to turn it over to Chip to report on the bills.
The bills, I presume, Jason, you read these too? Yes, thank you. Usually I get called if somebody hasn't done it, but the first one is the general, there's only one set of bills since our last meeting. In the general fund, there was a total of $548,929.02. There was a separate McGilton fund, $3,000 on the McGilton fund, and a payroll of $927,757.70, 927,757.7. Jason, I read those. There was no problems, not by me and by Jason, so I move we approve the bills.
Can I have a second?
Second.
Oh,
And-
Jason,
Looked like he was making that.
Was that
he
a,
was raising his hand.
no, okay.
All right,
Okay.
Steve.
And any discussion? Okay, hearing none. All those in favor of approving the bills, please respond by saying aye.
Aye.
Any, opposed? Any abstentions? The ACSD bills are approved. Next, we're moving on to the report of the superintendent. And we have Nicole here, representing us since Peter is not here tonight. Is there any words you want to say in the beginning here? I'll let you just take over the next couple agenda items and
Okay.
thank you.
Hi, everybody. It's nice to see you all. Beautiful day. I am sitting in for Peter to introduce 3 parts of the report of the superintendent tonight. The first part is an update on the strategic plan for equity, and we have a guest who will, she's much more than a guest, who will be here to walk us through that. And then Caitlin will walk us through an IB presentation, and then the third is the professional appointments. And so the first person is Emma Mulvaney-Stanek.
And co-chairs of the team, can we
Yes.
the table for 10 minutes?
Yeah,
please.
Yes.
Yes.
Slide in right next to
Those are going somewhere else.
Here, pass it around. I will take it. Or you don't. I'm gonna go for that. Oh, that's fine, thank you. Do you want to sit next to each other? Yes, please. You don't like raising?
No, I just want to. So Emma and the co-chairs for the strategic plan for equity are here to provide you all with an opportunity to understand the work that's been happening this year, to put us in place and time and where we've been and where we're headed.
Great, and I know there are 4 new board members, so I wanted to also give a little background so get you all up to speed. But first, let's do introductions of our little team that we have here. So I'm Emma Mulvaney-Stanek. I've been the consultant working with the district for almost 2 years now to help guide the strategic planning process through some advisory phases and now into the exciting action team planning phases. And actually smushed in between was time with most of you with the board in the late summer, fall to start really setting the parameters around what your goals for the next few years would be. That's enough on me for now. And the 2 co-chairs from the action team are.
Hi, I'm Camilla. I'm a senior here at UHS. I'm Samantha, and I'm a parent. I have kids in Shoreham and a child at UHS.
So we planned about a 10-minute or so presentation to just give you a high-level view of where we're at and what's to come next, and to leave about 5 or so minutes for any questions folks have. That's kind of our plan. The presentation slides are in your board packet, but I'm going to go through them because I know you have sometimes viewers at home or people who watch it later. So I'm going to speak to just the first parts, and then the co-chairs are going to take over kind of the real meat of it. So it's one of these. I pointed at.
We gotta make sure it's on the side.
Okay.
I thought I turned it on.
It's okay, no problem, blinking. There you go, okay. All set, great. So this should look familiar because some of you at least have been on this journey so far. So we began, believe it or not, way back in November of 2021. This is when the advisory committee was first formed, which was the first real community engagement element of this process to make sure we had folks at the table that include students, caregivers and families, staff who are not from central office, staff from central office, to really start to create what are we hearing from the community. At the same time, you had a big deep dive of data collection from students and families, as well as data crunching from your standardized tests and behavior and discipline kind of data run by a different consulting firm. And so we brought that all together. The advisory committee itself started meeting in December, really in earnest in January, and worked through the rest of that school year, and then looked at all that data coming back from, it was the Hanover group that handled the data. At the time, they also worked on creating an initial equity definition, because starting with a lens around equity, we needed to make sure we were all using the same term and concept. So they put that all together. They worked right up into the summer, took a little time, and created a final presentation to the board in August to review their particular opinions and what they had refined as what they thought should go into the ultimate goals, mission, and vision for the school district. And then those of you who are here were part of the work in that fall to really work on the components as the board to formulate what the goals would be. There's 3 big goals which we'll share. And then looked at the mission, vision statement. We worked on, theory of action steps and a few other components and a few series of board meetings, a small little subgroup. So there's a lot of deep board development over the course of about a 2-month period or so. And then in order to actually start to then look at the strategies and action steps, so to implement, how do you get to those goals and how long should the strategic plan be? And most importantly, so you don't have a 50-page strategic plan that would be very hard to implement in an impactful way. How do we then bring together a new group who could bring some new perspectives with those same principles of youth engagement, family engagement, staff engagement of all levels? And so that's what's formed the action team, which I'll mention in just a second about who's on that team. And they have been hard at work since January, putting together really thoughtful strategies and action steps that would move the district meaningfully forward towards these 3 big goals that the board adopted in October. And they, more importantly, developed an equity rubric, like an impact tool, to really look and think about when they're putting these strategies and action steps forward, and narrowing things down so that we really have a very narrow list, so you can have a high impact and high outcome for these goals over the next 5 years. So not everything will be in this plan, because it's not possible, right, to do that well. And so we'll bring that to you soon when the action team is done, which we expect to be next month in June. I'm going to go through the first 3 slides and then pass it off to these co-chairs, and then we'll take questions at the end. So if you have a burning question, please write it down, and I'm happy to go back. So just very briefly, the action team has 4 students on it from different levels of the high school, 3 parents or caregivers, 3 educators or staff from different parts of the district, 1 building-based administrator, and then a few folks from central office who help to round out a lot of the stuff that, if you might remember, goal 2 is around access and a lot of district and system issues. So it really made a lot of sense to make sure that we had folks at the table who could help round out those pieces of the conversation. There's particular intention, because this is an equity-informed strategic plan, to make sure members of underrepresented communities were on the action team, because that was sort of the out of step if you don't have that intentionality in the design of who's there making these recommendations. And additionally, in terms of the intentional design, offering stipends so folks could participate, accessible meetings, offering childcare if folks needed it, for example, and then working with community partners in various ways in our process. The core responsibilities of the action team, which again was a little bit different than the advisory committee, was to really start to get concrete. So looking at all this data and information gathered, what would actually advance the district towards each of the 3 goals, to narrow these recommendations. I mentioned some of this before, work with an equity impact lens to really make sure that we're having the highest, using the highest leverage points to make sure that if you choose that, it's really strategic, because you know you're going to have a big outcome for the amount of work that the district will put in. They've met a lot, twice every month since January, and there was a series of stakeholder meetings in the spring, which the co-chairs will mention. And finally, as I turn it over to the co-chairs, we also found it important, like we did with the advisory committee, to have a youth-adult partnership leading the action team. They've served as liaisons and advisors to myself and Emily Epstein from the central office, just in terms of in-between meetings and agenda design. So I'm gonna pass it over. You ready? Okay, all right. They got it. Okay.
Okay. So in January and February, that was part one. So that's where we took all the data and feedback and everything. We sort of just looked at it and sort of reflected on it and decided what we were going to talk about, what we thought was important and everything. And then in March and April, we had a series of meetings where experts or stakeholders came in to our meetings and they sort of shared their experiences in ACSD, and there were 4 areas: marginalized students and families, socioeconomics and poverty, and special education disabilities, and equitable access to resources. So it was actually very helpful to sort of hear everybody's opinions and thoughts and experiences, especially since it's a decent sized panel, but it was sort of very helpful to get lots of more perspectives. I think the questions that we ask the experts are, what is our district doing well? And where can our district improve in terms of equity around the focus areas? And what stood out to me in that part of it was that it was much easier and the list was much longer for what the district needs to improve than what experts were able to tell us the district is doing well. And that, as a parent, was that felt big.
So then we're sort of moving from part 3 to part 4. So we sort of took what all our experts said and sort of kind of just like wrote it down. And then we sent a survey out to moms and MUHS, and there's 24% response rate. And what the survey was like, we listed the action step. And then we were like, do you think this is very important, semi-important, or not as important? So that sort of gave us a good idea of where the student body stood in ACSD, of whether, we think this is really important, whether that's not as important. So that sort of gave us a greater perspective of the student body and where they stand with all these action steps. And so now we're sort of finalizing and looking at what we can sort of smush together, and there was a lot. So we're sort of just trying to finalize and narrow, and as I said, sort of we're using this like T-chart tool, sort of figure out like what can we do that would have the greatest impact. And because as she said, like if you have like a 50-page strategic plan, none of it's going to get done. So we're trying to sort of narrow it down and do it the best we can.
I think it's important to note that we, while we're presenting a document with what we feel are priorities, the students spoke and they feel it's all a priority. And so while our group is not going to be presenting to you every idea and every action step, it's important to note that the students want it all and deserve it all, and that's what they were saying in that survey. And I think with a 24% response rate, that's a lot of students saying, action needs to be taken. And I think that also says that there's, a 24% of the student body that is willing to be a part of that change, which is a huge percentage when you're talking about kids.
One other note I'll just make about the youth survey, we'll share that analysis as part of our final, documentation and recommendations at the end, so you can see that. But we asked at the end of that survey, if there was anything else, if we missed something completely, please let us know. And the vast majority of students either didn't put anything all in there, but a lot of them said you've you've covered it between all of these different strategies you've asked us to rank. We really think we covered it. And then we did itemize about, 10 to 12 or so additional ideas that people said. It was often, though, a very specific piece of feedback, often what you see probably in other surveys done, even in the Hanover survey. Some people have very specific experiences they've had, and we want to make sure that's heard. But we did capture that as well. But I found that to be a really interesting piece because I was curious if there was some big glaring gap that we still had when we were putting out this initial sort of balloon to see if we were headed in the right direction. Is there anything else you want to add to this part? Either one of you? No? Okay.
When is the appropriate time to ask questions?
This is our last slide. So, yeah. Maybe 2.5 minutes, maybe 1.5 minutes. Okay. So the final steps. So we're almost at the end of this process, and so just what's coming up next. So your action team will be finishing up recommendations likely in June. We're going to make sure there's not any unfinished business. This sort of happened with the advisory committee last June as well, where summertime is just a hard time to get people engaged. We're going to try to stick our landing in June, but we might into the summer, but certainly get you something very soon. And then it gets passed back to you as the board to ultimately take these strategies and action steps and take a final review of that and take a vote so that we can make sure the district can start to move forward with the affirmation of the board that this is indeed the right set of priorities and direction going forward. That will not be an in-depth timeline, super in the weeds document. It will be your original 3 goals, strategies, and then action steps. And then from there, in the fall, it goes back to whomever your new interim superintendent will be and a team of folks to start working on the implementation of that. So how do we sequence over 5 years? How do we, what comes first? Where is the district best positioned to start moving some significant change? So there can also be benchmarks and realistic evaluation points. So there could be that accountability so that you all are keeping it accountable as the board and oversight, but that the community and your students also know what's year 1 versus year 5 goal, so that expectations are clear and you're starting to really continue that just a really healthy engagement that I hope this process has really felt like it's kickstarted over these last 2 years. I just put out there about in a year, but generally it will be important for you as a board to have periodic check-ins. It doesn't have to be annually, but just putting that out there that what feels right. I know you also have a transition year ahead of you, so it'd be a little different if you had a same superintendent going forward. So we'll just have to work with what feels right so that you feel like you're getting the report backs that make sense with a big transition year ahead of you. So I haven't been looking to the right. Hi, okay. And so with that, I have also slides in case anyone's curious, because I wanted to just show you. So for example, in the fall, this was the vision statement that was approved by the board. These again is in your board packets. These are the 3 goals I kept mentioning that the action team's been working under. So these were all approved by the board in October or so, and then the board's definition of equity that we've been using as our benchmark, as we've been the tool I mentioned. This is kind of our understanding of equity that we've been putting forward. And with that, questions? Well,
Okay. Steve, and then Mary Heather.
Back when you were looking at this stuff in March and April, you had 4 particular areas that you were looking at. One was around race, the other was around poverty, and a third was around disabilities. And then your final one was equitable access to resources. Could you expand on what that means exactly?
Absolutely, and just one clarification, marginalized students meant folks who have underserved and underrepresented all identities, so it wasn't just limited to race.
Okay.
But equitable access to resources was an attempt to start to look at, because you have 9 schools and people have different experiences based on the size of the schools, based on what that school can provide in terms of programming wall to wall is going to be different at Mary Hogan than it would be at a smaller rural school. And so trying to look also at what can be offered delivery. It came up in the Hanover survey that we talked about last fall around differences of access to transportation and after school programs and those kind of pieces. So it was a broad invitation during that panel, these REACH panel sessions, for people to explore who work on a district-wide basis where they see gaps and where they see opportunities to think about a more equitable access to resources, regardless of what community or school you're in.
So there was a feeling that the rural schools don't have access to the resources that other schools do?
Well, we looked at really sort of the facts of this around who has access to early education, who has access to after school programs, different transportation schedules, the ability for students who are in the centralized middle and high school and what they have access to because of limited transportation, for example. So I think among other things, we can pull up all those notes for you if you're interested in more detail, but we just explored the differences that are just come in the reality of a very small rural school versus one that's, sorry, this is not urban, but like Middlebury based, larger school.
Thank you.
Yeah, of course.
Mary Heather.
The question I had was, if you could just talk a little bit more on the equity impact tool that you were referencing and what that is exactly and how that works when you're looking at
Absolutely.
evaluating some strategies.
Yep, I should have actually dropped it in here, and I can email it to the board later. So it was a tool that, so folks in central office have been working in advising me as well as the co-chairs around developing a tool that was simple enough to learn but useful when you're trying to weed through, dozens and dozens of pieces of feedback, and placing them and being thoughtful about how do we make this even better. So it was a simple, instead of a x axis that's just kind of 4 equal quadrants, we made it more of a T, because we wanted to keep moving things more towards a more equitable outcome, and to the left was more of an inequitable outcome, so making things less equitable, which is not where we would want the district to go. And we also use the y-axis to really indicate that's kind of the status quo. So we don't want to also hover over status quo, because you've heard lots of feedback from your students that all is not well for certain students who are going through this district, or families for that matter, or staff, right? There's all these different layers that we've even talked about last fall. So this was an attempt, and they literally used it as a mapping tool to see how can we keep moving things out further, and then a leverage point of high and low in terms of the impact of how many people in your school community were impacted by that particular strategy. And as I kept reminding the group, sometimes you do pick a strategy that has a smaller population impact because it has a high value, because that part of your community has been really underserved for years, and you want to very much strategically invest. I don't mean necessarily in dollars, but like invest intention in moving things forward to have a different outcome. And in the beginning of the advisory committee process, we explored a lot about language access, because you had some Spanish-speaking folks engaged in that process, and that was pretty eye-opening, I think, all would say, including myself, around accessible meetings and communication with families, and there's already stuff the district's been implementing from that. So anyway, that was the tool used, and I'm happy to.
I think I just successfully added it.
You did?
It's the last slide. I don't know if I did. I should have said, I hope I did.
Let's see.
Let me share it.
No. Darn it. It's not in. It's in my version of it, but it's not in this version. So you will get it. How about that?
Okay.
Thank you. Great
Thank you.
question. Thank you. Yeah.
Joanna.
This is really great. I've been really wondering what this action team is up to, so thanks for this update. I'm curious about how you put together the survey for the students. And I think at one point you mentioned you had sort of examples of action steps, and then the students could weigh in how significant they felt it was. And then you answered my question, was there anything new that you learned from it? And sounds like not really. How did you come up with those example action steps, or maybe could you share? I don't know, I don't wanna
Yeah. Do either one of you want to
get in the
remember
weeds.
how we were starting to develop those strategies between?
I think we sort of just, the whole action team sort of came together after meeting with all the experts and sort of tried to sort out all our notes and sort of be like, okay, this seems like an action step, this seems like an action step. And then we sent it out to the students, but it was also interesting trying to get the wording right so it could be accessible to the middle school, but also the high school. So it was, I think we just kind of put them there, and then they would just rank them most important to least important.
And one of the useful things I neglected to mention, actually I should have put it on one of the slides, is at the head of each action team, remember we have four high school students involved, we would have pre-meetings with the students, Emily and I, to just sort of check in about the agenda. It's a different environment when you're one student or even students in a group of 12 or so adults. We try to be really intentional. And one of those meetings, I brought the draft survey and got some really great and direct feedback. It was really fabulous, and I encourage more of it. I mean, in the spirit of this language is not going to land. This is too wonky strategic plan language. So we really reworked the language to make sure that the essence of what we were trying to ask the students could actually effectively come across to them, and it was really helpful. And so yeah, and then it went just on a Google survey format. And I will say the middle schoolers knocked it out of the park in terms of their response rate was something like 40-something%. Nothing against the high school, so the 24% is together at high school and middle school. But still, I mean, when you do surveys in general, you're doing great if you're hitting 20%, usually 20 to 25%.
That's awesome.
And we only had it out for about a week or so because we were trying to fold it into the action team's work in May.
So thank you for clarifying that 24%, because that was gonna be my question, was there more middle school versus high school or the
That's
other
more
way?
middle school, yeah. And that, this will all be in that detailed document that we'll share.
Joanna?
It might be in the detailed document that you're gonna share. I was curious about who you brought in for experts too.
Yeah, I had the same question.
I think we can share, I'm looking at Emily, I'm pretty sure we will share that full list in our final report. I don't know what.
Minutes or
Oh, great.
I've given little updates on the action team page. I think I included who the experts were that were invited. And the other thing that is important to note is that we intentionally designed this committee with folks who we consider experts too. And we really talked about what experts means intentionally and talked about it being both personal and professional experience. And so for each panel, we had members of our existing members of the action team plus newly invited members. So each time, like Camilla sat on one of the panels, we invited folks from the action team to sit on that. And the only other thing you guys did such a good job. I'm just listening with what I know and what's been presented tonight. There was a running document through this whole process. So at the end of each meeting, we had the 3 goals that the board presented, and then we added to it. So we added strategies and action steps after each meeting. And Emma would update us and let us know which new ones. So after each expert meeting, after each meeting that the action team had. So that's the big document that we were working from each time. And that's the document that they then pulled from to give the survey to the middle and high school students. So it was the same material that was just built upon. So we were continually saying, what else are we missing? What else are we missing?
Would have felt very familiar to those of you who were in this process on the board when we would have a session and I would go back and rework it with the subgroup and then bring it back. It was a very similar sort of generative process.
Any other questions?
I have just one comment. Obviously, the actions are the important parts once we've identified all of this leading up to that. And I'm impressed by the 4 categories, which are huge categories, obviously, some of which we as a board can, either how we put out resources or policy or anything else, have a great impact on. Then there's other ones, such as poverty and whatever, which are societal problems that affect everything, okay? As far as participation, not just of students, but of anybody who's in whatever category as to how they participate in our society. And so they're sort of different, and I see it from an action item from a board's perspective or a school district's perspective. On the other side, how do we deal with the big problem of poverty from a school system where we've been trying to impact on those students who potentially fit that category. So to me, it's sort of overwhelming a little bit, so I'll be interested to hear the action, because I can identify things that I think would work on, conceptually, from some perspectives, but I don't know how I deal with some of them. Personally, or in setting a policy to have an action that's going to improve.
Right. Well, spoiler alert, it's not gonna be solved poverty. I mean, that's not gonna be something that you're all gonna be voting on.
No, I understand that, but
Right,
I still,
I totally hear you though, yeah.
I
Yep.
just have this
Yeah.
picture of different things, and Steve's first question about resources or equitableness between, because part of the reason we didn't proceed, other than COVID and all, with the facilities master plan and some of the changes that might have come from that, was waiting on the whole equity part of that issue too, as to whether it could be dealt with in a way without closing schools or with closing schools or whatever we're going to do. So the equity part from that point of view is really important. But I also have a concept that I can put in. The poverty one, I have a hard time trying to figure that one out.
All of those 4 categories are really like another lens for which people were looking at, like advancing this goal, but keeping in mind, the unique experiences of folks who are experiencing poverty or families experiencing poverty or marginalized identities, the unique experience that folks are experiencing when, the success goal, which is, actually I have that over in front of me, that the district creates a learning environment will inspire passion for learning, et cetera. So really looking at it from that lens to make sure we were looking at all angles of it, but then find out these action steps. We plan to and Emily and I were just talking about this, also show you what we did not include that was in the really long generative document in the final recommendations, because, you know, you ultimately will make the decision. So if you see pieces that were, ideas that were generated along the way that the action team, for whatever it's worth, didn't prioritize for the final cut, you could pull things, you know, in or be inspired. There was also a whole list of things that we actually really considered low-hanging fruit that didn't even need to be in the strategic plan, that we'll refine for you, that we think would be easy to implement soon. I won't say when, but like very soon. It wouldn't even have to be something were discovered throughout this process as something that would really help advance the district, but could be pretty easy, frankly. It doesn't need a whole lot of work to implement in 2 years from now.
Jillian.
Sorry, I have another question. I'm curious how, like, your work and your work and your work has it been influenced by going through this process? Like your current work, how strengthening MTSS is either woven into it, or is it separate?
It's definitely not separate in any way, shape, or form. I think the intersection is there's a lot of work to be done to strengthen MTSS, and I think this group is naming a lot of the items. And I think once they become more officially perhaps sanctioned, that'll help to implement MTSS with more rigor and more attention to the students who are most vulnerable right now.
And I think, I mean, in terms of, if I put my curriculum hat on, which we'll be looking at IB next, like really thinking about our curriculum framework, I think that this causes us to think a little bit differently about how we would dig into that reflection process. Who is impacted by it and how to attend to different groups in that process. Certainly as a building leader, it's been really helpful to hear directly from students about their experience. And to start to think, I think it helps to shift the focus and to solidify the focus.
And it's really powerful. Even today, we were brainstorming, Caitlin and I were in the same group, and Emma said, think big and bold. Don't think about whether it's possible, right? Think about, like, dare to imagine how it could be. And I think that's probably the most impactful. We don't often get to understand that.
Didn't hear half of that, but.
Right.
And the reason I just want to add, if I may, just on the bold piece, is because we're so strategically narrowing the strategies and making it not a 50-page document, that is the invitation for the district to think boldly, because then the impact will be that much more impactful, frankly, for students, which is the whole point of trying to be really strategic around making a big impact on a more equitable outcome for students. So.
Well, thank you so much for coming in and giving us an update. I too have been really anxious, to see how you guys are progressing, and can't wait until the next step. So what would that look like? Do you think we'll be having a presentation of it, or a document?
Yeah, I think, so the last meeting for the action team is June 5th. Then we'll do some drafting, Emily and I, to make sure that this meets what everyone hope tied the loose ends. So realistically, with graduation and whatnot, that will probably go a little bit into July, assuming that folks don't feel like they need a little more time. And I know your meeting schedule is such, so we'll figure out the right timing. It would be great if I can come back with the co-chairs to help present that work and invite the action team. So, if you're flexible, we'll just try to find the best time when we think most people will be able to participate. Knowing that, we don't want to rush this either. We want to make sure that you have enough time to really be ready to receive it and work with it. So August at the latest, I would hope. So we have to bring it all together.
Yeah, that would be great. And I think it's really critical at the timing, because we'll have an interim superintendent, to really bring that individual up to speed as well as to what this work is and, what additional work we need to do, and verification, that kind of thing.
Yep.
But I'm excited, so I can't wait to get the final results and the next step. It seems like when we were meeting was such a long time ago, but it really isn't that long, but, so this is great. Thank you so much.
Yeah, no, of
And
course.
thank you for, coming.
Thanks for having us. Thank you.
Thank you.
trying to think of what the introduction is for Caitlin being here, so, tell me where I get it wrong. So when Caitlin stepped into her new position, she did a really close lean in with families and staff about concerns. And IB, not surprisingly, kept coming up as a theme. And so she dug in right away, and the result was a collection of data and then a sharing of that data in a way that we could all understand it. And so Caitlin's going to share that. Spoiler alert, this led to district leadership deciding to recreate this for all of our grade levels so that we have data across the board, K to 12. Yeah.
The only thing that I would clarify, the only thing I would clarify about that is I haven't really worked with parents on this theme yet. I've started with staff in our building, and I'll share with you at the end of this where I think we're going next. And I think that engaging parents and community broadly really matters, but I don't think that we have the capacity to do it in May, June. So I think that we might set that one aside to the fall. But let me show you what we did. So I think probably some of you have heard the buzz that now that Peter Burrows is leaving, we're gonna let go of IB. It's not true. And so that was the narrative that I stepped into the high school with and heard the buzz in a different way as a building leader than I did as a district leader. And so I really leaned into that question with our faculty. And so this is a slideshow where I recapped the process so far for all of our district leaders, and then I updated it because we've continued the conversation. So I updated it to show you where we are in this conversation right now. And this is work that obviously sort of spans my two roles, right? Because I arrived at the high school where there was some tension and some buzz about IB, and then I was hired to stay on with IB like etched across my forehead as the curriculum leader for the last 7 years. So setting the context, that was the backstory. There was this obvious tension that just needed to be named and addressed. So at a faculty meeting on April 17th, I gave our whole MUHS faculty a heads up that this conversation is coming. We're gonna now talk about IB, but not about are we getting rid of it, but about how is it going, what's working well, what is not working well. And so I, was prepping them for May 3, and I said, but heads up, let's name this. Caitlin is biased toward IB. I am the district curriculum lead until July 1. Okay, so, but I really wanted to shine a light on this. So I'm biased because Vermont is currently very focused on building a coordinated curriculum as the foundation for this MTSS work. And the fact that we have such a robust PK-12 coordinated curriculum that we can talk about, that we can show, that we're now in the process of trying to make it more public facing, so it's more transparent. Letting go of that would be a significant step backward in our MTSS work. So I'm biased for that reason. I'm biased because Vermont requires proficiency-based teaching and learning, proficiency-based grading and graduation requirements, and the MYP, the middle years program in IB, comes with criteria built for us. So where other districts were building proficiencies, we were adopting fully baked rubrics. And the middle years program, as we know, goes 6th through 10th grade. So last year we took on the project, our high school faculty took on the project of taking those 10th grade rubrics and complexifying them on up so that they could also serve 11th and 12th grade. So now we have a 6th through 12th grade proficiency-based model that's based on rubrics that the IB provided for us. So it would be a significant step backward to let go of that system right now. It also, Vermont really emphasizes transferable skills. In IB lingo, those are ATLs, approaches to learning. These are skills that transfer across disciplines that can then be used to apply in the real world. And so we don't need to create our own transferable skills, which our colleagues around the state have had to do. We have those, and they're thoughtfully vetted and produced by an international group. And this, the IB has the infrastructure and the professional personnel to vet their materials over years and continually improve them. And so we would be giving up a lot if we gave up our IB framework. Also, we've spent 7 years building this thing. So that's a lot of professional energy that I would hate to see us lose. And finally, when I was applying for my first job in ACSD, which was then ACSU, I was digging into IB because the district was then in the process researching IB as a potential framework to adopt district-wide, to increase excellence and equity across our 9 schools. And I fell in love with the mission statement, which emphasizes education for a better and more peaceful world. And so I am biased toward IB. Like, let's just name it. I think that this is a phenomenal program. I think it's imperfect, but I think it's a phenomenal framework. So I set that up on April 17th, and I said, but help me understand, right? So clearly I'm looking at this from a particular vantage point. Help me understand what your frustrations are. So the questions were, which of the frustrations are about the framework itself, and which are about our local approach to implementation, which are decisions that we have made that we could make differently. And which of these are about IB, and which are about the diploma program. Because a lot of the frustrations anecdotally that I was hearing were about those last 2 years, the diploma program. So I constructed a survey that really dug into the various pieces of IB to get really specific. And I told the faculty that they had about a week, a little over a week, to fill out that survey, and please go ahead and use your collaborative time that's built into your day, reallocate it to completing this, so that it's not another thing, it's replacing other things you might have done. So, and I asked them to please get it to me before 9 a.m. on the Monday of April break, because I was gonna be working the whole week and I needed some time to frame our March 3rd conversation. So that was the setup. And then this framing the conversation is about March 3rd. May 3rd, thank you. May 3rd. So we had an early release day on May 3rd. We spent the first, it's 3 hours that we have together, 1:30 to 4:30. We spent the first hour in basically a faculty meeting, then we took a break, and then we came back and did 2 hours of this IB conversation. And I started by sharing the results of the survey. And then after I did a spiel much like the one you're receiving right now, then we broke into 6 groups and went and had small group conversations with a protocol. And then we came back and shared out. So I'm gonna run you through that now. So this is our opening to that May 3rd date. So this was just information about that survey itself. So I emailed it out to the MUHS private list, which has 149 people on it. That's an interesting one to me. There are actually 104 people listed as working in the building. And so I calculated this response rate based on this 104. We got about a 28% response rate, which was not an impressive response rate considering I gave them time in the day to complete it. I did, though, for the sake of transparency, give them access to all of the survey responses. And if you have an ACSD email account, which all of the board members do, you also could click on this link. We'll make sure you have the slideshow and you can see all of the responses. So I outlined the purpose of the survey. It was to understand with more specificity what people do and do not like about IB. It was to look for strengths and uncover limitations and frustrations in a really specific way. To frame the conversation for May 3rd, and to identify next steps to strengthen our collective practice and to better support all learners in MUHS. So that was the purpose of doing this work. Here's the first big impression. The question was, in general, how do you feel about International Baccalaureate? This is bold pink, love it, dark green, loathe it, and something in between. Right, so you will see these colors are consistently negative, these colors are consistently warm and fuzzy, and then there's this neutral in between. So of our 29 respondents, that was the split. So about 48% negative, 31% positive, and 21% neutral going into the conversation. So the survey asked 3 different types of questions. There were these feeling questions. How do you feel about this element of IB? On a scale from loathe it to love it, it was actually in these, it's highly problematic, it's ineffective, inappropriate, or unimportant, it's poorly implemented here, or it's got potential, it's generally positive, or it's especially helpful, essential, or exciting. So as we look at a few of these graphs, you'll see pink is warm and fuzzy, dark green is negative, and yellow is like we're getting something wrong here, right? So those are the feeling ones, and then I also ask them doing questions. So these are stoplight questions, right? So how are we doing? We're getting it all wrong, to we're nailing this, to I'm not sure. Those are the scales. And then finally, there were open-ended questions, and I limited them to 350 characters because I was committed to reading every single one of them. Okay. So I asked I chunked it into sections. So I asked first about the core components. These are the components of the IB that they are applied to all of the IB programs. So the primary years program, the middle years program, the diploma program, and the career-related program, which we don't currently have. But I still have hope that one day we can bring our Career Center colleagues along with us. So if you, when you have this slideshow, you can actually click on this link, and it'll give you those pie charts for all of these different questions that I asked. So about the core components, I asked, the mission statement for IB addresses all of those programs. The learner profile, international mindedness, language requirements. Remember, I was writing this for educators, so it's just full of acronyms that they know, so I'll decode them as I go. The approaches to learning, the approaches to teaching, that inquiry-based, concept-based approach to teaching. The guiding and supporting documents that are produced by the IB's approach to learning diversity, and this sort of sense that there's an elitism to IB. So those are the things that I asked them about in this category. And again, you can see all of the pie charts. Every one of those is a separate pie chart, but I'll just show you a few of the highlights. So again, this is the scale. These are feeling questions. How do we feel about the IB mission statement? This is the especially helpful, exciting. Nobody thinks this is highly problematic. There are 0 dark greens on this one. How do we feel about the learner profile? That's this poster that's hanging over here, these 10 character traits that we try to build in all IB learners, students and adults alike in our system. Right, so the IB learner profile is relevant to the board, right? We're all part of an IB community, so we want to be open-minded, we want to be principled, those traits that we start building in PK all the way up through the grown-ups in our system. We like the learner profile. Nobody hates it, and there's a lot of warm fuzzy in this chart. How about the focus on international mindedness? Here we see, we're not really nailing this one, or at least some people think so. The requirements around language learning, that's more mixed. So remember, IB requires us to start second language learning at least as young as 2nd grade, which is why we now have Spanish in all of our elementary schools, that we only had it in 2 or 3 before IB came here. It also requires us to have students take the same language from 6th through 10th grade. We're not actually nailing that yet. We only require 1 year of world language as a graduation requirement at the high school. But so people have really mixed feelings about these requirements around language learning. It used to be at the high school that was an elective, and now 1 year is required for everybody. And that's a real culture shift and practice shift for us. So then I asked them about, let's think about the middle years program specifically. And again, you can see all of the charts there, but I'm only going to show you a couple. I asked about the unit planner. This is a structure that the IB provides for our teachers to use as a planning tool. I asked about the rubrics. Those are those proficiencies that we don't have to define because the IB gave them to us, including the tools to evaluate work. I asked about the subject group overviews. This is the scope and sequence of our curriculum that we're working on, that I just said we're working on making this more accessible, more transparent, and available to share. That's next year's project. But it exists in our system, this scope and sequence for every content area. The global context, these are significant themes in the middle years program, much like the transdisciplinary themes in the primary years program. Interdisciplinary units, personal, and the personal project. So those were the categories I asked about for the MYP. Here's how we feel about these rubrics. That was a pleasant surprise. Here's how we feel about the interdisciplinary units. We're not doing much of these, right? We haven't really leaned into this, and our teachers are feeling that. There aren't conducive structures yet to make this easy. So that's work to be done. The idea would be that every student would experience at least one interdisciplinary unit, an IDU, every year. And we're not meeting that mark yet. Then I asked about the diploma program, and again, you can see all the charts, but here are some of the highlights. Oh, sorry, these are all the things I asked about. The rubrics, the courses, the fact that our courses are 2 years long, the full DP course load, the DP stress. And I think I asked specifically about student stress, but teachers feel stressed too around the DP. TOK is theory of knowledge. CAS is creativity, activity, service. EE is extended essay. So DP courses. This is how our 29 high school teachers who responded to the survey said they feel about DP courses. Notice, nobody has soft angry feelings about it. If they don't like them, they really don't like them. But there's a lot of warm feeling there too. The full diploma course load. Stress experienced by DP students, right? So when we get specific, I think we can see where we need to lean in and do the work. And that's what we're trying to accomplish, is to understand the pinch points and understand the work to be done, and then go set about doing the work. This is a significant problem. And I asked specifically about students. This is a problem for our teachers too. It's a different kind of workload, and in some places we've managed to accommodate that, and in some places we really haven't. And so that teacher workload is a real issue that needs to be addressed. But look, Cass has so much potential, right? This is this idea that students think about what they love and what they want to study, and they reflect on it and they document it, and it's part of their graduation requirements. It's only applicable at this point for our full diploma candidates, but this is a thing that has so much potential to draw students in that I wonder if we should be looking at that differently. Okay. So then I looked at, notice those were all the pink, green, how do we feel questions, and now we're switching into the stoplight, how are we doing questions. And so you can see all of the charts here. This is the big, I had to print this on 11 by 17 because there's so many charts. So I asked some questions about our departmental curriculum collaboration. Our collaboration across the two schools, MUMS and MUHS. Our documented shared curriculum, proficiency-based grading and reporting, our grade 11, 12 rubrics. Remember, those are the ones that last year our teachers wrote based on the middle years program rubrics. Manage back. The balance of course offerings across content areas, the current distributions of preps across teachers, including students not taking IB exams in DP courses, which is a thing that we've done to increase access to that amazing curriculum. But how do we, is it the right choice? That's a choice we've made locally. Teacher workload, TOK, theory of knowledge, as a graduation requirement for all. And requirements around language learning, I asked it again here. So, and the year-long block schedule, which is our local schedule that is not beloved. Okay, so this is the scale now, on the stoplight scale. Departmental curriculum collaboration. We love this. Not everybody loves it, but a lot of people love this. The MUMS MUHS continuum collaboration. We're not nailing that one yet. We've got mixed feelings about it. Manage that. But the good news is that before presenting these graphs to our teachers in that faculty meeting part of May 3rd, I had already shared that we're leaving ManageBack behind, and starting next year, we're going to be using Google Classroom for communication with students, Google Shared Drives for curriculum collaboration and documentation, PowerSchool for grading and reporting, and ManageBack only for those things that are very specific to the diploma program, where this tool is a communication tool with IBIS, with the International Baccalaureate Information System. So this will have a very small role in our school going forward. So that was awful, but we are already solving it, okay? And then we get to the year-long block schedule. We don't love this. And we are committed at the high school to starting in August or September, bringing a team together to really think about what is the schedule that we mean to be running to meet the needs of all of our learners for the 24-25 school year. So we'll dig into that work. And then I asked them about flexible pathways. And my bias shows up in the way that I worded these questions. I don't think we're nailing flexible pathways in our school. I think far from it. So I asked about issues related to flexible pathways, the perception that the IPDP is the best pathway to graduation in MUHS, the pressure that high-achieving students feel to take the full diploma program, the current balance of DP and non-DP course offerings for 11th and 12th graders, and the lack of equally robust alternative pathways. So we do have alternative pathways in our school. Students can take courses at the Career Center, they can do early college, they can do Independence Day, they do have options. But you can see my bias in how I worded these questions. I think we're not nailing it yet. So the teachers agreed with me. right? So the perception that DP is the best pathway, we don't love this. The pressure that high achieving students feel to take the full diploma program, we don't love this. The lack of equally robust alternative pathways, we don't love this. So this is just here so you can see what I did if you're interested. We had 6 groups. I organized them to have departments represented across groups and different roles in our system organized so that we had diversity of perspective in each of those small groups. I gave them a protocol so that everybody's voice could be heard and so that the conversation led to a thing that we could make use of. And I gave them access again to all of those pie graphs and I gave them an hour to do the work. When they came back, we only had not long to report out. And so we reported out in small groups. And I committed to coming back to the conversation and I gave them an exit ticket. So this, you could click on this link. I probably shut it down. You probably can't actually see the questions, but I got 42 responses. And the good news is there were 42 people in the room at the end of the day. So that was a perfect response rate this time. And here's what I saw in general, how you feel about the IB. Here's the first 29 responses and the follow-up 42 responses. We have mixed feelings, but it's not an all dark story. I was really interested in this. In general, how do you feel we're doing at this stage in our IB implementation, right? So remember, this was how do we feel, and this is how are we doing. And we see 0% think that we're nailing this. But this could use some tweaking category. This is where I think we really need to lean into our work. And then, so I brought that much to our whole team of district principals, administrators, and we decided that we wanted to extend that work beyond the high school, to really start to understand how educators across the district are feeling about this. And I brought that update to the MUHS faculty on our May 15th meeting. So here's a few more slides just talking about how the conversation carried on May 15th. I said, so clearly, this is managed back. Remember, it's going away, basically. Okay, so that almost checked. This lack of equally robust alternative pathways, on June 20th, we'll have our first sort of formal conversation about this, but this is significant work that I see as mine as a building leader to carry forward in the coming years, including partnering with our local partners like the Career Center, the Parent-Child Center, the various places that educate various communities that educate our students outside of our school walls. We'll have a committee working on the year-long block schedule. And I'm not sure how we're engaging this, but we have to engage this thing. So I have a couple of invitations from teachers to come and meet with some of their students. So I need to say yes to those invitations. I said, so where are we going from here? This survey has been adapted for the middle years program at MUMS and for the primary years program at our 7 elementary schools. That has gone out, and we've given teachers through the end of the day on June 20th, which is another teacher work day, to complete that survey. It would only take like 10 minutes. It's not a huge commitment. You could spend a half hour if you really wanted to fill every 350 character limit box. So district-wide, we're gonna extend the survey to our educators. And probably I will be handing that information off to Courtney Cron, my replacement, to carry that curriculum conversation when I'm no longer in that role. I'm going to, at the high school, look for opportunities to talk to students, not survey them, to understand their feelings. And then we need to expand the conversation. Some of that I imagine would be board-led. Some of it will certainly be district-led in the coming year. NEASC is the New England Association of Schools and Colleges. Our high school has been NEASC accredited for a very, very long time. We've been invited to pilot a NEASC IB reauthorization process. So rather than doing IB reauthorization and NEASC reaccreditation as two parallel, complicated processes, we're blending them together. We've had our first training of that in March, and we'll have 2 days of training in June. And that is a process that will cause very structured reflection on how we're doing. It will expand our NEASC accreditation, to be K through 12 rather than just 9 through 12, so that's kind of cool. But it will also wed that into a single process that really asks us to reflect on how we're doing. And I think we need to keep working on it. I think that's all I have. Thank you. Very good.
Caitlin, can you just, the timeline for the reauthorization stuff, is that during next academic year or is that after, like what?
Yeah, so it starts, I mean, it has started, it largely started in March when we had our first training and we did the first sort of vetting of, okay, these are the things we want to do. There are all these priority standards and they're designed by school. And so we went through and reviewed which of these do we want to do as a district and which do we want to do as a school. So that we've started that process of narrowing what will this look like as a pilot for us to do this as a district, doing these two things at once. We'll have 2 days of training in June, and then we'll be going through this process, which I imagine Courtney Kwan will be the lead on this. And it will be a lot of stakeholder engagement over the next 2 years to hit the mark at some point in 2025.
And I think we talked about inviting, I can't remember her name, the woman who's leading it, to come talk to the board.
Oh, great.
And give us insight. She's really good.
Yeah.
I just have another follow-up. First of all, thank you so much for doing this work. This is, I think, just really, really important for the community to see that finally, there are eyes being put on these concerns and questions. And I think it's smart to start with educators and kind of expand from there. So thank you for doing this work in this year especially. One suggestion or one question I have is whether or not educators were asked about the time that they have to devote to training, because that has been a recurrent theme in some just kind of, feedback we hear in the community. So I'm just,
I did
I
not
guess
ask
just
about that.
putting
That's
that out
helpful.
there as a possibility. And I don't know if there's flexibility around that or how the district implements that, but that would be something I think would be important for
Yes, there's
educators to be
flexibility.
asked.
And
Okay.
I've missed it in this round of data collection, but we should come back to it.
Perfect, thank you.
Steve?
So many of the problems, even in the initial authorization of IB, we had some issues with the diploma program. And it is my understanding that IB itself is looking at the diploma program and potentially revising it, mainly because it does not follow the inquiry-based learning system for the most part. Is that on the horizon? I mean, it sounds like there's a lot of energy and confusion because, even members of this board have conflated the DP program with IB. Is it possible that those changes are gonna come through and maybe alleviate some of this, just like dropping managed back?
Yeah, so I am not an expert on IBO, International Baccalaureate Organization, which is a big international organization, but I can speak to some of that. So in February of 2020, right before the world fell out from under all of us, Peter and I got invited to a really fun meeting at the college. The college has a lot of students who have graduated from the United World Colleges there as students. The United World Colleges is a series of private schools, private international schools around the world that have a combination of the International Baccalaureate Diploma Program and EL, experiential learning. And I think they only have students for 2 years, but it's a pretty inspiring model. And many graduates, Middlebury consistently hosts several United World College graduates. So the United World College has a powerful connection with the IB diploma program. And so it was a meeting of UWC and IB at the college, and because we were an IB district, we got invited to go. And the conversation was very much about how do we adjust and adapt the diploma program to meet sort of the evolving understanding of best practice in education now, and to alleviate some of that stress that we're seeing. So that conversation is definitely happening at the IB level. I'm not sure where it is in process, but IB does have a very robust, iterative, reflective process in all of their programs. The IB has also started, what was that? They've started an inquiry into student well-being. And so when I saw that coming through, I signed up to be on that mailing list so that I can participate in and track that conversation. We also have an opportunity to partner with the IB on a program that's about increasing access to the diploma program that's really puzzling through some of these challenges. So I've signed up as the principal, but I haven't recruited colleagues to join me in that yet because we're all busy and I don't want to overwhelm them yet.
Okay, I don't know who's. Ellen, okay.
Thanks, Caitlin, this is great. A couple of questions. First, what was sort of the reasoning behind how you chose those charts? Were they the ones that just really jumped off the page one way or another?
You mean back to my thought process?
I know we can look at all of them. but I'm
Yeah,
curious
you
how
can
did
see all of them. I guess I was trying to show sort of the range of responses. Those core components, the ones that I showed were mostly very positive. People mostly feel pretty good about those core components. That language, the language requirements was pretty mixed, but so I was showing sort of the flavor of that. And the diploma program where you saw some real doozies of people are frustrated here, that was much more common in the diploma program charts. And so I was trying to show things that highlighted the story in broad strokes while also showing people how they could get to the details.
And then I was wondering if, on the flexible pathways charts, if you interpret those responses as sort of agreeing with the statements, more than just saying, and I can't remember exactly the language, but some of them was, and you said that you were sort of laying out there what your theory is. So do you interpret some of those as people being like, yep, there is a lack of alternative pathways, or that's more of an agreement statement, and that's what we're seeing in the results?
I think so. I'm laughing because when I was geeking out about this over April break and I came home with my pie charts and I showed them to my 12-year-old, she said, Mom, these are leading questions. And she was looking at those and I was like, you're right. I mean, I've been trained in survey development. I slapped this together and those were forward constructed. I think those 4 questions about flexible pathways, I think that my bias was showing, and I think that those results show that other people also were willing to hop onto that story, that we don't have significant, robust alternative pathways. Never would have passed a survey research class in grad school.
And then the other question that I had was, and this is not, I don't really know how to frame this around data or measurement, but so much of what I thought that orange slice that you were showing us about, sort of what I was interpreting as like there's potential, but we're not there yet. And I know that conversations that I have with folks, with what I hear, and I think this is probably pretty true, is a perception that IB is totally inflexible and that there's no variation off the curriculum and it's dictated by this group of people in Geneva. And that's like a very strong sense. And I think there's so much nuance to the reality that I don't even fully understand. So I think just to throw out there that as we're engaging in these conversations with educators and as that expands out to more audiences, to understand more where those perceptions of inflexibility are and to be communicating where there's more flexibility than we may even really fully appreciate.
There's so much more flexibility than we largely understand. And some of the misconception is coming down from my team and how we've rolled it out, right? And here's how we're doing this. It's almost all of it is open for reflection and for redirection. There are some things that are fixed, right? So the diploma program is the most fixed of all of them. But even within that, there's a good deal of flexibility. I think it's really important to remember that PK through grade 10, the primary years program and the middle years program, it's a framework, and our teachers write that entire curriculum, right? So there are, and then they can revise, they're expected to reflect on it every year collaboratively and to revise it every year. So we're always making choices. There's a ton of flexibility. And I think that, I don't think that there's a really quick way to shift that misconception as much as to get into the conversation and say, wait, we can make a different choice there, like our schedule. What are the elements of it? We did switch to this year-long schedule at the high school because of IB, because of our understanding about what was required in our implementation. And there are some things about that schedule that we're probably going to need to maintain. But the schedule writ large is open for debate and open for review, and we need to make thoughtful decisions about how to do it better.
Joanna?
Because I have such limited personal experience with the last 2 years of MYP and the DP program, something that a college professor said to me once really just like resonates over and over again. Like in his classroom, he can see a student that has graduated with IB experiences, like writing skills and critical thinking skills is just being elevated. And I guess I'm just curious, I know it's not part of the questions, but in like anecdotally, like we're 5 years into this, do the high school teachers feel like the learning profiles or the attributes carry through to them when they start teaching them at the high school level from the PYP and MYP years?
It's hard for me to answer what the high school teachers think about that.
Yeah.
But I can say that one thing that I've heard repeatedly is we haven't yet seen a cohort of students who have been educated through the whole continuum, right?
Yeah.
So we all started at once and they're coming on up through the system, but we haven't seen a student make it all, or a cohort of students make it all the way through that yet. So I think we don't really know. But then when you think about, I don't know, we all saw at least part of the 5th grade exhibition, which was so exciting. And for those of you who made it to the 10th grade personal project, these things are starting to light up. And now that we've got people coming back into our schools, it starts to feel like a real celebration of student inquiry. There are so many of those opportunities for students to dig into real inquiry work and then share their thinking, even often in draft form, with a real audience. So for instance, today from 8:30 to 9:30, there was a theory of knowledge exhibition in the Commons. And so I got to go and interact with a whole bunch of students who had just submitted their first draft of that work, who are then going to take those we had questions to help prompt their thinking, and then they'll get to revise and reflect before they submit that. So, and next week is the extended essay colloquium. Like, there's so many opportunities for students to really lead their learning and present their learning and showcase themselves as learners. That as a curriculum geek, I find that incredibly exciting. And I think we're starting to build a culture here. And it's a culture that builds on itself over time as students move up through our system.
Chip had his hand up next.
I know, IB is in mostly places around the world, okay, that are defined sort of like the United World Colleges, which gives it an elitist component. They're not all wealthy, but they're all very smart. We actually have some Middlebury High School student who's in an IB program in one of those colleges. So it'd be interesting to get that feedback just for that one person. However, are there other spots in the United States that are sort of in our model? Not, I remember we got stuff on Chicago when we were even considering it back 10 years ago or whatever, that, but places that are districts that are like us, that must suffer with some of the same questions and concerns. Not international IB, but, Middlebury or someplace in Michigan, or I don't know, wherever they are, there have to be. So I don't know how we tap into that.
Yeah, so yes. Is there any place just like us? Not that I know of. But as far as American public schools and American public school districts, yes, they exist. We did visit, various groups visited at least 3 when we were going through our inquiry process. We did a trip out to the Midwest in Washington Township. And what was the other one? We went to one in Iowa and one in Ohio. Not Iowa. Oh gosh, I'm sorry.
Well,
It's a long time.
all I'm saying is that, we may have that kind of, but to me, that would be important too, in this inquiry of trying to figure out how we fix the problems of this big system, which obviously has lots of good parts to it.
Yeah.
But how do you deal with the schedule? How do you deal with that?
Well, I need to go to so I have been to a lot of IB trainings in learning how to bring this here. I've never been to a DP head of school training, which I will have to have as a principal. I'm really interested in going to one of those in person because that's where you get to meet other DP head of schools, and I can ask those questions of like, are you hitting this wall? Or what about this thing? Or how have you managed that? We did a lot of IB networking in the early years. There's the Guild of IB Schools, which is our regional sort of consortium of IB schools. we've never made it to Bethesda, which is the regional office. We've talked about doing it, but you know, a lot of those connections really came crashing down during the pandemic when people were overworked and overwhelmed and not traveling to places. I feel hopeful that as the world feels really open right now, and as people feel less overwhelmed by just educating through a pandemic, I think that those connections will be really important for helping to understand how is this happening in other places. Our IB coordinators, though, do really network with other IB coordinators regionally. They do reach out and ask these questions.
So, I know you're tired.
Oh, I'm sorry.
So I'll apologize for these. So, for students with special needs, how does IB allow for combinations around languages of, you know, that requirement, which is very difficult for some students when they're struggling with putting their own language together and then be told they have to take a foreign language? Are there any opportunities for it not to be necessarily a foreign language? Like, could it be like learning sign language or something else that they might be able to manipulate and use better? So that's a question. When you talk schedule, will you be including your friends down the
You
ramp?
know I will. I already have started that.
Down the ramp, because, you know, that would be really cool to have more students there. And the last thing is, with my job at CCV, there's a lot of unused money that could be used by MUHS students in dual enrollment, concurrent classes, early college. There's not a lot of students from Middlebury that do any of that, so.
Yeah, so the flexible pathway stuff is really, I'm very much interested in, and you know, we chatted that when their current interim superintendent, Tim Williams, came to chat with me about something, I was able to show him, look, your times are written on my board because I'm mucking around in our schedule and I don't want to step on that, right? So I've had conversations with him and with Jay Stetzel. We, in the end, didn't end up making changes for next year, but I understand the intersection of those two schools, the Career Center and our school, much better than I did before, which will be helpful as we really launch into this schedule conversation next year. Definitely include them as partners. And I think that other flexible pathways partners are regionally, I need to get to know them better and understand their offerings better. As far as the special education question, and students with diverse learning needs. So I think it's most useful to think of the International Baccalaureate as a Tier 1 curriculum framework, right? And so this is what we are doing as foundational work for our whole community of learners. The International Baccalaureate isn't really going to weigh in on intervention in special education because those are governed by state laws, right? Not international guidelines. And so we layer our tiers of our multi-tiered systems of support on this. And so all of those same decisions that we have the agency to make locally in any curriculum in Vermont, we have the agency to make in an IB curriculum in Vermont. As far as could we do sign language as a second language, we've had that conversation at the admin counseling team meeting. We haven't taken action on it, but it's a thing that people have expressed curiosity about over time. So I think we just need to think creatively and flexibly. I think that IB would not accept sign language as a world language in their definition, but I'm not afraid to say, and we made this decision to best serve our students, tell us how we're doing, they'll give us feedback, right? And if we've gone rogue and they don't approve, we'll get a matter to be addressed when they come back and visit us every 5 years, right? And that's just an opportunity to reflect and decide if we're doing it right or need to make a change. So I think that we need to be willing to make the decisions that are best for our students, for our learners. And knowing the framework really well, we can know what is flexible and where we're gonna kind of push the boundary a little bit. I'm not afraid to push those boundaries.
Okay, Ally.
Yeah, this was something you were saying earlier about students coming up and having had all of the years since kindergarten. Where are those students at right now? Like, what grade are they in?
I'm trying to be, it's not hard, it's just long-winded. So we started the process of becoming an IB World District in 2017. The most cut and dry authorization is the diploma program. We had our diploma program authorized for the 2019-2020 school year. In the diploma program, you don't start teaching DP until you're authorized and you're running the whole program. So that started 2019-2020. The primary years program and the middle years program, you start playing in that sandbox and trying things out from day one. And then you become authorized when you've demonstrated that you're getting the hang of it. You've documented the right moves. You don't need to have it completely, fully perfect. It will never be perfect. But you need to have really built the thing in a robust way before you're authorized. So you've been doing it for a while before you're authorized. So our middle years program was authorized that same school year, the 1920 school year, but after the change of the new year, so in 2020. So that was across the middle school and high school. It was 7th through 10th grade at the time because our 6th graders hadn't moved up yet. And then we were slated to do our PYP 7 school authorization visits in April of 2020. So that got canceled, or that got postponed in the pandemic. We did a quick pivot and we did them remotely. We did virtual authorization visits in June of 2020. I can't believe we pulled that off. In retrospect, it was not the most compassionate thing to do. We were officially authorized across our 7 elementary schools with 0 matters to be addressed. It was a perfect score in September of 2020. And that's what made us an IB World District, at the time one of fewer than a dozen in the US. So, but that means that we haven't been an IB World District only in the age of pandemic. We are having our first experiences of post-pandemic teaching as a new IB World District.
So if we're thinking of it from that perspective, then
I didn't answer your question.
then it would be children in the 2nd grade right now.
Who have had it from the beginning?
Yes, that you were authorized and have had it from the beginning.
Yes, thank you.
Starting at kindergarten, not pre-K, because not many kids in
Yeah,
our
we
district
only
have
have
access to pre-K.
3 pre-K classrooms that have the IB experience. Our private pre-K programs aren't international baccalaureate.
Well, thank you so much, Caitlin.
Thank
I
you,
think
everybody.
it's good to hear that we're taking the great work you did, really starting it and doing it with all of our other schools as well. And I think this will be really valuable for whomever we select as an interim, to get some context and then decide, well, how do we look at students and, survey them, parents and what have you. So obviously this is just the very beginning of the work.
Yeah.
Right? But it is the beginning, which is where we needed to start. So thank you so much for that.
You're welcome. Thanks for letting me give you an update.
Thanks, Caitlin.
Okay. So the next thing on the agenda is professional appointments. Everyone should have seen that in board pack. And so with time, so we can kind of move forward, could I have a motion to approve the professional appointments?
May I ask a question?
Yes, you may.
So Julie Hagan, it says land and literature, is that supposed to be language and literature? Just so that we make sure we're
Yes.
approving her for the right position?
Yeah.
And we can ask questions once we get the motion on the table, if that's okay.
I'll move to approve the list of
Second.
professional appointments.
Okay, so discussion.
Okay, so she's language and literature, not land and literature, is that correct?
Yes.
Probably,
Okay,
yeah.
I just wanted, I read that and I was
Thank
like,
you.
oh, is this a different course that we're
I was just saying,
teaching?
new course.
Yeah.
Lots of walkabouts.
Thank you. Any other comments, questions? Yes, Lindsay.
One of the names I see on here, Colleen, is listed as a new hire as a special educator, but not departing. She's an existing staff, perhaps paraprofessional. So it just makes me wonder, so if somebody moves into a different role, we don't see them as departing. We only see them in their new, so, okay, I didn't realize that, so. So some of the new hires might not actually be new hires, they're just changing roles within the district.
Yeah, you could say it like that, they're a
Okay.
new hire for that role.
It'd be helpful to distinguish between the two. Like at the last meeting, we saw an SLP as a hire, we were like, woohoo, but now we see an SLP departing. We have a school psychologist. Woo-hoo! Yay. So, but it would be helpful to see, that distinction, I think, if that's possible.
Mary Heather.
I think just the clarifying is that we're looking at individuals and not necessarily positions, right? Like, so this isn't a list of positions vacated. These are individuals either hired or leaving.
Any other discussion? None heard. So I would like to vote on the professional appointments. All those in favor, respond by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? The professional appointments have been approved. Thank you so much. Okay. The next item on the agenda is under report of the board, and it is the skate park support letter request that we approve, sending a letter of support. And we have Jill and also Ethan Murphy. And Jill, how do you say your last name? Because I'm gonna kill it.
It's Quackenbush.
Okay,
It's just
thank
like
you.
the- yeah.
And they do have a presentation, which was attached in the materials. I gave them about 15 to 20 minutes and including discussion. So if we could get started, if you guys want to come forward, that's fine, wherever you're comfortable.
Do you guys mind just your names again, just for the record?
Sure.
That'd be great. Thank you.
Jill Quackenbush.
And my name is Ethan Murphy.
Thank you.
So, hi everyone. As I just said, my name is Ethan Murphy. I'm the president of the Middlebury Skate Park Project. And
I'm Jill Quackenbush. I'm the secretary and the treasurer of the Middlebury Skate Park Project.
and we're here on behalf of the Middlebury Skate Park Project, which is a much larger group than ourselves. We're very excited to be here. And this is kind of the culmination of about a little over a year's worth of work. And we're seeking approval from you all as landowners for the land managed in Rec Park by the town of Middlebury and Middlebury Parks and Recreation. As Barb mentioned, Jill has been doing the lion's share of the work over the last 5 months and has put together a presentation. It's about 10 minutes long, and then we'll open it up for Q&A afterwards.
Yeah, hopefully we can speed through. I know we gave you slides in the packet. We've kind of pared it back a little bit, so hoping that you had some time to review some of the lighter, more fun stuff in the slides, so we can really get into like the meat of what we think you might have questions about. So, yeah. We are a 501c3 nonprofit, and over the past year, we've heard nothing but overwhelming community support for the skate park. It's been amazing. We've heard nothing but positive support. This is a quick timeline of the work that we've completed and who we've been talking to. Early on, Dustin Hunt of Parks and Rec was a big supporter of the skate park, specifically in having it in Recreation Park. We did look at alternate sites last fall and found that Rec Park was the most ideal location for the skate park in Middlebury. We've been working with Bill Kernan of Public Works and Dustin, following their guidance as we move forward with the project. We've met with Bruce McIntyre, the Director of Facilities at ACSD, to discuss potential permits and other setbacks required for the skate park. We had a wetlands ecologist come out to mark the wetlands boundary near the area, and we looked into all the other permits that we might need. And we've spoken with both Chad Kravitz and Peter Burrows to discuss the project in preparation to come in here today. So this is a proposed location for the skate park. The size we were recommending is 7,500 square feet to serve the population of towns comprising ACSD. And there are so many benefits to this location. Mainly its central location in the town, proximity to schools, downtown, and the college. It already has parking available, amenities like a bathroom and water fountain at the teen center. It's in a highly visible area where recreation activities are already taking place. So it's not off, you know, in an unused lot somewhere. It's really right in the center. I said some other examples of skate park, but specifically this one in Gorham, Maine, that was just recently completed. It's about the same size as what we're proposing. And plan began in 2021 and was completed in October 2022, which was like a great turnaround time. Like that's pretty quick for a skate park. And it had widespread support from the community, local businesses, volunteer groups in the town of Gorham, and was also located close to an elementary school. This is a really preliminary example of this possible skate park design. It was sent to us by a company called Spawn Ranch Skate Parks. So it's just kind of an idea of what it could look like in that spot, but not by any means the final design. Of course, we'll go through many design rounds, community feedback, and all that. So for insurance, I know this is a question that came up. We've confirmed with the town's insurance provider that the skate park will be covered in its existing policy. This is the section in the lease talking about the liability limits that are required. So not less than $2 million for a single occurrence. And this is the actual liability limit for one occurrence is $10 million in the town's policy. So that's covered, confirmed by the town's insurance provider. The skate park will be unsupervised and free and open to the public whenever the park is open. So it's the same as basketball courts, fields, and playgrounds generally. Research at skate park rich states like California finds that skate parks don't invite liability lawsuits any more than ball fields, playgrounds, and swimming pools. This is an example of skate park safety rules that we would probably have at the skate park. Basically, it's skate or ride at your own risk. No supervision provided. There's language about inspecting the equipment, surfaces, don't ride if it's broken or wet. Skate park users and parents of skate park users know that there's like an assumption of risk with these activities. There's an inherent risk of injury with any sport, especially one that requires a lot of practice, falling down a lot, and an amount of risk taking like skate park sports do. So provided that the facilities are well designed and built by a professional skate park company and maintained properly, the risk of injury lies inherently with the sport itself and not the facility, and people have to understand that. Maintenance for the park will be provided by Parks and Recreation Department, just like all the other rec facilities in Rec Park. Concrete skate parks don't require a lot of regular maintenance, but Parks and Rec will be in charge of inspecting the park and budgeting for required maintenance.
And I'll just add there that one of the reasons it's taken us a year to get here is Parks and Recreation wanted us to become a nonprofit, which we have, and for that stewardship role with this maintenance. But they too are excited about a concrete park because it requires less maintenance than wood and metal.
Mm-hmm. And then us as a nonprofit, the Middlebury Skate Park Project, will also providing stewardship for the park, inspecting it to make sure everything's in good shape, light maintenance, and litter cleanup, leaf and snow removal, things like that. Here's some of the setbacks that we know about so far. The 10-yard setback from the large soccer field right there. That was from Bruce. There is the wetlands buffer is kind of that green line, or the wetlands boundary is the green line, and then the 50-foot setback. So if we build beyond that, we don't need a wetlands permit. Let's see, the skate park and the pump track are included in the stormwater permit that the town is in charge of for the northern section of the Mary Hogan site. We've confirmed we won't need stream alteration, endangered species permits. Act 250, there's an existing permit for the site, so we just need to file an amendment as soon as we have the stormwater permit and the final skate park design. So in relation to all those setbacks, here's where the footprint kind of falls. For open hours, it'll be the same as Rec Park, which is 7 a.m. to midnight, although it won't be lit, at least not at first, so it probably won't be used at night. And we believe the skate park should remain open to the public on school days during school hours. So we know that there has been, some concern maybe about the open hours for the skate park being open even during school days. We are in the lucky position that the rec park lease has not yet been extended, and so we have the opportunity to take a look at, update, and clarify some of the rules regarding the use of recreation park. For example, some of the questions that have come up as we've been researching for the skate park is, what is the official boundary of Mary Hogan? And can the boundary be clearly marked in some way to make it clear to the public? What's the official policy on use of the fields during school hours? And how are those rules communicated to the public? Can the fields be open to the public during school hours, or are they considered part of Mary Hogan? Can the pump track and skate park be mentioned in the lease the same way that Memorial Sports Center, the pool, and the pavilion are now? So these questions definitely need answers, and we need some time to discuss the lease and all the rules in that. Today we are asking for the initial permission from ACSD, the landowner, to construct a permanent concrete skate park at Rec Park at the location we proposed. The permission is essential for fundraising at this stage and for the continuation of our skate park effort. We believe the skate park will be a beloved new recreation facility used by ACSD students, families, and teachers. We know the details for the public use can be worked out in the coming months and year. We all want the skate park and recreation park in general to be safe. That's both a safe place that's both accessible to the public and to ACSD students. So we're confident that we can make that happen. So while our big goal is the concrete skate park, did I miss one? Oh, it's gone. We also have an amazing opportunity to activate that space and provide a place for our local skaters and riders to practice as soon as next month. So in the same location, we would like to build a wooden mini ramp. So there's a little picture on the top there. It's a small half pipe. Would be kind of like an interim structure that's designed and built by the community. And it can be moved to another location when the concrete park is ready to build. Silver Maple Construction is volunteering its wood shop and some of their employees to help us build the bones of the mini ramp. And we've gotten commitments from Arcade Miles and Knob Metalworks to help with the materials. We received a $5,000 Spark Connecting Community grant for the project, and we're planning a community build day in June and July to finish the structure. The footprint will be about 26 by 32 feet. We're still working on the final designs. The site prep will be completed by Public Works, and it will be the removal of the top layer of grass and soil and just putting down 12 inches of gravel to form a base under the ramp. It will be completed with help of volunteers, with guidance from our experienced builders, and if the timing works out, we'd also like to invite Mary Hogan students during the last week of school to come help paint the sides of the mini ramp, hopefully using some of the same motifs as Michael Kin's mural of Mary Hogan. Okay, so thank you for your patience and attention.
I was just gonna say, Michael Kin is one of our board members.
Yes, he's on our board. So these are the two requests, actually, that we have today. So the first is the letter of permission for the concrete skate park, which we believe will take about 1 to 3 years to complete. And then the second, we have the materials, the volunteers, and the money ready to build the mini ramp at the same location. So we're seeking permission for the site prep and construction for that project to happen as soon as next month. So thank you so much. Do you have anything else to add?
I would just say, kind of in closing, and some of you even thought that this might be deja vu. I think last October, you all, or some of you approved the bike pump track, which if you've been to Rec Park recently, you see that it is well underway and super exciting. So we are following in their footsteps. In fact, Eric Remsen is also one of our board members, and this is good for kids, it's good for the community. Again, we're here in front of you to seek permission as the landowners.
Any questions or?
I have a question.
Okay.
The piece of land, I mean, I'm from the area, I walk around a lot. This particular part of the greater area is not used for anything at this point.
That's correct.
It's not part of the field, we're not.
It is part of the field.
the small soccer field.
I believe that that's not.
You can see the
It's
goals on
used-
the picture.
This is
No,
a
those are
old
the back
Google
goals.
Earth image, and I'm not.
Those are,
So I anticipated this question
Field is there.
and I actually,
you can see the goals.
Yeah.
It is part of an existing field.
and I would just to answer that question, so, right, Rec Park is managed by the town and Parks and Recreation. There's a master plan for the space. It is a little older, but we're coming to you as kind of the final piece in this approval process. Whether or not that's the appropriate sequence to be determined, we are all volunteer board and we're doing the best that we can. You kind of saw our timeline meeting with Bruce McIntyre, Jen Kravitz. So it's been a long process to get to this point, but I just confirmed today with Dustin Hunt that soccer field, that is not a problem, that is the location that he actually recommended for the use of that park. Just above it would be the pump track, so, yeah.
And I believe this image is older, so like those soccer, the goals are not there currently. So moving forward, yeah, I don't think it's being used.
And his exact comments were that it would still have a place in Rec Park, that this would be kind of activated for this use, and that, you know, it would not replace soccer, that it would.
Tricia.
So I wanted to say, kind of with one of my other community hats as a employee of the library in the town, I have been able to both kind of see the development of the skate park project, because you have your meetings in our library quite often, as well as I am the library's representative on the Parks and Recreation Committee, so I have been at those meetings and presentations as well. And so I do have to say, I have been impressed along the entire process with the amount of research and thought that you have put in each step of the way. The work you guys did evaluating different spots around the town, I thought was especially well done and well thought out. So, you know, I feel like I have a little more context for this than the rest of the board, but I have been really impressed throughout with both the work that this skate park project has been doing, but also can attest to the positive community support. It's been really great to see a wide swath of the community come out in support of this project and really getting excited about it. The additional kind of outreach that has been done in the middle school and with the elementary school, you know, bringing skateboarding into the wellness classes, and as well as running summer camps and things like that, I think has really shown that there is a base excitement and support within the community for this activity and for this space as really being a positive addition to our offerings in the community.
So I think, did you have your hand up, Lindsay?
No, I will
Okay.
put it up.
Okay,
Steve
Suzanne
first,
Oh,
and then-
okay, Steve.
Generally, I would be in support of this sort of a project. I have a few questions. Your literature shows it being primarily used by younger kids. And I know the experience in Virgins that it's usually teens and 20s. Is that something we should be concerned? Because yes, the pump track is there, but that's like little motocross bikes, and that seems to be the clientele that the elementary school is. This is skateboards and inline skates, and that's an older crowd, and it's pretty close to the elementary school. And you want to keep it open and accessible to the public, even during school hours. That's the only thing that gives me pause. I don't know, I'd like a little more discussion, maybe. Tell us why you think it's just going to be younger kids and not the older kids.
Yeah, no, it's a great question, great concern. The skate park our vision is for all ages. So a skate park, you could have multi-generations of people using the skate park. But if you think about Rec Park in particular, right, there's pickleball, there's soccer fields, there's tennis. So again, it's for all ages. And I think you'll see with the bike pump track that, that is supported by ACBC. I think you'll see families coming there, and that's very much what we want. We would love for this space to host a birthday party or something like that. So I think the perception that it's an older crowd, I don't want to say it's dated, but skateboarding's in the Olympics. Kids just thrive on this. There'll be skate park kids that are just there, every day after school and just learning a new trick every day. So I guess my response is that we see it as all ages. We see that as being really the mission of Rec Park in a town like Middlebury. And again, good for kids, good for the community. I don't know if that answers your question, but that's my thoughts on it.
And it's also, there's plenty of dads especially that skateboarded when they were young that are there with their kids. It's really a multi-generational. It's not just, a teenager, 19-year-old. And plus it's like, it's more of a stewardship issue and a community building issue of the skate community feeling ownership over this space and having them involved. And so I think I question the perception of like the teens and the 20-year-olds being up to no good close to the elementary school, and specifically what the concern is if they're crossing to the school or just doing like bad things, or what specifically that concern is.
I think that
if you've got kids right there, okay? The language that older teens and younger 20-year-olds use, especially if they're in a public space, not necessarily that great for kids. And some of the more challenging, moves that, somebody sees that and they go, oh, I want to do that. And as you're saying, this is a higher risk sport, I think, than some of the other ones. I'm withholding judgment right now. But I would like you to address some of the safety issues and some of the cultural issues around the crowd that you expect to show up here. That was the only.
Yeah, the crowd we expect to show up are all citizens of ACSD. And in the same way that you might see somebody backflipping off the diving board 20 feet away, yes, some people may curse that they shouldn't, right? So I would encourage you to check out the video that we put together of the flex period that we did at the middle school, where you had college kids showing middle school kids how to skateboard. You had people like me and Jill from the community coming in there, putting pads on kids, teaching them how to learn their first trick. That's the culture that we're bringing to our community. And it is positive. I think it's changed a lot over the years. And you see communities like Manchester that have really embraced this, and it's an incredibly positive thing for the community. Yeah.
Suzanne, I think you had your hand up, and then Mary Helen.
So my questions, thoughts are around equity. Towns other than Middlebury have to pay to participate in Rec Park sports. So that is a huge turnoff for other towns to bring their kids in. And then the other part of the equity is that there is no public transportation from Shoreham, from Bridport, from Ripton, from Cornwall. It's called parents, or ride a bike or something. So to say that we're selling this as for everyone within ACSD, I think might be kind of short-sighted. It's great that Mary Hogan kids would get to use it right away possibly, but then how else would we be able to allow all the other students in the district to use it and to be able to feel the thrill of riding a skateboard. I mean, my son wanted to skateboard when he was younger, but in Bridgeport, you don't ride a skateboard on any of our roads because it just doesn't work. I mean, the cracks, you fall through.
Yeah.
So that kind of ended very quickly, his idea of, oh, skateboarding sounds like a fun activity. So I would, great idea, I would like to see some equity conversations around how we can make sure everyone gets a chance to.
Yeah, it's a great comment, and you know, we view this through an equity lens, absolutely. In fact, skateboarding is the third least expensive sport out there. So we're already working with the teen center and other partners to provide skateboards free of charge. This park would be free and open to the public, so you would not pay to use this. And as the Shire town in these surrounding towns, a lot of people do come to Middlebury already. This will be an economic driver, but there's also better access here than there are elsewhere. And even though it's right next to Mary Hogan, it's also adjacent to the middle school and the high school, you know, within walking distance or biking distance or rollerblading distance or skating distance. And so we see that as the most opportune location. This is a heavy lift financially, so we'd love to build a skate park in all ACSD towns, but.
Well, that was my next question, was what happens if you don't come up with all the funding?
Yeah, we're driven and
I mean, that's a big dollar value there.
this is the first step toward actually being able to apply to grants like VOREC, which just gave $200,000 to Ludlow to build a skate park. So with your approval today, we could be well on our way to fundraising. Like I said, we have a really dedicated board and a larger, very dedicated volunteer base, and we can do this together.
Great, Heather, and then Ellen.
I have a couple of questions. I guess the first and easiest one is if you could go back to the slide concerning limits on liability for the Benton Parks and Rec insurance policy. And I remember this being a question and somewhat of a concern with even the pump track as well.
This one?
Yes, so this is per occurrence, $2 million, but I had written down, let's see.
This is what's
Okay.
required in the lease, but the actual town's insurance is much more than this.
So I wrote down 10, is that?
Yeah,
That's the next.
Okay, gotcha. Okay, so that's their actual limit.
This is the actual, yeah.
And the requirement on the lease is 2. And I imagine the requirement on the lease is commensurate with current activities, not, so I would imagine you would anticipate, or that we would anticipate with the lease agreement, a higher required limit of liability given the riskier activities that so that's just something, I'm just putting that out there, because it just seems, you know, yes, Ben Parks and Rec has their insurance, but if there's a limit that is low, the rest of that liability falls on us. And that's something that we do have to be very serious about and just make sure we're thinking about that. Not that this does, not to negate the great idea and the community, the opportunity for community building, but that is our responsibility. That's our fiduciary and legal responsibility. So I think that's something that we really need to keep in mind. And then the other thing, you know, some of the other things that I think Steve was alluding to, just concerns about activities at the areas. And this, I think, applies to the pump or the bike park as well. When we have activities happening on school property during school, because sometimes gym classes go out there, so kids are right there. So it's things, again, that are not necessarily skate park specific, but things, you know, just having people from the community right on school property, perhaps using substances, perhaps smoking, things that are specifically prohibited from school grounds. So I think those are sort of lease agreement things. I just want to put that out there, like that's an issue that we will have to reconcile as we consider approving these sorts of things. And then the last thing I just want to put out there is, as we're thinking about facilities planning and improvements that maybe need, you know, made to Mary Hogan, and whether or not there's construction or staging of construction equipment that may need to happen in an area as close in proximity to the school. It's just something I just want to put out there that that's a possibility that needs to be considered. Because the facilities planning stuff, it hasn't gone away. We will have to make improvements to Mary Hogan at some point. So it's just something I want to make sure we're thinking about in terms of the timing if we're going to go ahead and proceed with the concrete park, which is a permanent, a more permanent surface. So I just think those are things that we need to be thinking about. I'm not sure I'm ready to, write my approval just yet, but because I'm thinking about these larger issues, but I am supportive of the concept, and I guess I would be curious about the degree to which you all and Justin and anybody else who would be relevant to the decision-making process really examined other locations in our community, like over by the rec center itself. So I'm just curious about that, and if you could elaborate a little bit on that, that'd be great.
Yeah, I think my response to that, and the reason that we kind of went through the channels that we did to get to this spot tonight was, talking to Bruce McIntyre, talking to Jim Kravitz, talking to Peter Burrows. Even before that, I think we took out the slide, but there was a slide showing letters of support from the town of Middlebury Parks and Recreation. So these are the people that manage this space, have the long-term master plan for it. We were trying to navigate this the appropriate way. Like I said, this is kind of the first real resistance we've seen, but that's okay, and understand that. And I guess I'm just trying to do a better job of I don't know.
So even one of the things Mary Heather was asking about the different sites that you looked at and how you came to determine, and I know you gave Parks and Rec a long presentation on that. Could you speak to that?
Yeah, we had a site analysis that we're happy to share with the board. It was a current Middlebury College student, and it was based on a list of criteria. We had a brainstorming session at one of our monthly meetings at Hillsley where people just did the whiteboard, like, what about this space? What about this space? So we took that data, we did a full site analysis based on these criteria, right? Access, and that's access to downtown where people live. And
feasibility.
Yeah, all these things, access, teen center, access to bathrooms, economic drivers downtown, and this ranked the highest out of all the locations. It is also the location that Dustin walked us to and said, what about this? This is a great location. In 2014, we actually had the location in Rec Park designated where the cherry trees are that Rotary put in. So that's obviously no longer there. Space is few and far between. But I think it makes a lot of sense for something like this to be in a designated area in a town for recreation. It is outdoor recreation. That's where it is in Manchester. If you've ever been to the waterfront park in Burlington, right, it's a designated recreation place right along the bike path. So we did look at other locations. This came out on top in our analysis, which is a full analysis. And again, everyone's pretty excited about it, including Department of Public Works, Parks and Recreation, the town of Middlebury.
So Alex, I actually really love that skate parks are for teenagers. I mean, they're not for them. And I will say I brought little kids, like truly tiny children, to the Bristol skate park. And the teenagers at that skate park are so respectful of their space. They're really encouraging. So my experience of skate parks as a parent of young children has been really positive. I also think that there's so few spaces, public spaces for teenagers where they can be teenagers and not reckless and not disrespectful, but to be physical, to be in friendship and camaraderie with each other. I think the fact that it's very close to the courthouse, that's very close to a swimming pool and to fields and families, is a net positive. That Jen Kravitz and Peter Burrows apparently and other educators have been brought into this process gives me a lot of confidence in it. And I just want to say out loud that skating has a stigma, and teenagers have a stigma, and that they will be bad, and that they will be disrespectful, and that they will unnecessarily or unduly influence children. I think it's a really inspiring thing. The low barrier to entry is really important because anyone can skate, basically. And there are a lot of things that my town, that Cornwall doesn't have, like a tot lot. And I would never say don't have a tot lot in Middlebury because we don't have one in Cornwall. I'd say put it anywhere, and I will find a way to bring my kid to that tot lot. So I love this project. I think we should support it. I really appreciate the work that you all put into it and the presentation that you've given us tonight.
Ally?
Yeah, I want to speak to some things you were saying earlier about equity, and I know a lot of children personally from Ripton and Shoreham and Salisbury that find ways to like carpool and get to the Bristol Rec Park that you mentioned there, and so I think that kids are gonna find ways to utilize their resources to get to the skate park when it's in Middlebury. And one way that maybe we can help that is like right now my sons are allowed to bring their scooters on the bus. They have foldable scooters that like kind of fit inside their backpack, and they bring those to Middlebury and then use them to access things around town after school, even though they're from out of town, sending towns. And so if we make sure that we can like speak with the transit companies that we utilize to make sure that students are going to be allowed to bring their skateboards or their scooters or their rollerblades on the bus with them when they come to Middlebury, we could help them have access to the skate park.
And Ellie brings up a great point that I failed to mention, which is a selling point, and that is that a skate park is shorthand, but it is for all wheels, right? It is for, you'll see tons of scooters there, and you might see a few teenagers on scooters, but mostly kids. You'll see bikes coming from the bike pump track over to the skate park. You'll see wheelchair motocross. You'll see all wheels there.
I have a group of moms that I roller skate with at skate parks.
Lindsay?
You did a great job with the presentation, and I'm glad that there's such a public support with the project. The county needs more facilities such as this. I have a few concerns. There are probably things that can be addressed, but the things that have happened up to date are structured, supervised activities. And you're talking about bringing it to an open, free, unsupervised level. And I love all the things that I see that you're doing in East Middlebury, and I think we really need that. But it's not going to translate exactly. You mentioned, Burlington, and I've seen the Burlington skate park often, and it's predominantly older people, and it's predominantly like people just enjoying the skate park, but there's also some sketchy stuff happening there that I've observed, and they're really kind to the young people and seem to try to shield that a little bit. But that is, I don't know if that would be happening in Middlebury, but I just wanted to say it out loud. So when it comes to, I was looking at the lease agreement, and this would be another, I guess, a different topic for a different night when we're actually discussing the lease agreement. But the lease agreement mentions maintaining our existing facilities, and we're still charged for the district is still charged for the use of the Memorial Sports Center. And the bathroom and the water fountain are not well maintained. I was trying to figure out in the lease agreement, the lessee is responsible for maintaining the traffic lane, and I think that's from Court Street where you go through, where it goes back out again, and it is not well maintained. It is just a minefield of potholes. I bottom out in my Accord. I have to swerve. And so I would want to be reassured that the town is going to better maintain the bathroom, the water fountain, the traffic, and the skate park, to add something that has a high risk. And I think it's addressable, but there is what would you call it? There's a group of grown-ups who hang out at the rec park. They hang out in the you frequently have to call they hang out where the cherry trees are planted underneath the shelter. And some of these folks have some pretty, I don't know, they appear to have some issues, and parents of Mary Hogan students are sometimes, and educators are concerned. And I don't know about the proximity. I think it's like two separate things in a way, but when it comes to using the bathroom and the water fountain, we're all sharing this park, and there's just as many grown-ups there, it seems like, and teenagers and young people. And because of I have concerns about, when Steve was speaking about his concerns with the school day, I share the same concerns. They use that field pretty regularly, not just during the school day, but also the after-school program. And I don't think that it should be open during the school day on the school grounds, or perhaps you did mention, marking that boundary. But the swimming pool is only open very limited hours, and when it's open, it's very well supervised. There's somebody taking money, there's a lifeguard there, and I had concerns about the pump track as well. The pump track took away one small soccer field. This is going to take away another small soccer field. We can go and use the middle school soccer fields, whether it be for soccer or other sports, but that soccer field just has, it's a domino effect. So I don't know. Like the other day, there was a softball game happening while there were two soccer games happening, and it's very heavily used, including that space. Dozens of people drop their kids off at Mary Hogan in the lot, so there'd be a lot of traffic, like going from the Memorial Sports Center lot. They walk through where you're doing the skate park on your map to the school. I think there's more crossover than people might realize in the Mary Hogan school day in the use of the space. I'd be interested in seeing more about the land use. On your map, there's an area behind Twilight Hall. That seems like it would be a really great spot. And
I think that's privately owned.
That's privately owned. Also by the Middlebury Rec Center, where the lacrosse fields are, that's also on the trail around Middlebury, and there's that's also a central area that could have access to bathrooms.
The Middlebury Parks and Rec playing facility, the lacrosse fields, those are owned by the college.
Those are owned by so that would lead me to, have you talked to the college about this? But behind the Twilight Hall and both the rec center, that's closer to the college and the middle school. I absolutely want to see this happen. I have pretty serious concerns about the location of it happening so close to Mary Hogan. I'd like to see some sort of really clear boundary or something, or I don't know. I had the same concerns about the pump track being so close to the pool and the school, and we'll see how that goes. But I don't want my concerns to offset how much I do want this to happen in our town, because gosh, we really need it, especially for teens. And I think we do find ways to get to Bristol and other places, but when Suzanne, I didn't even think about when Suzanne started talking about equity, but it's true. It just makes me feel even stronger about how much we need to have transportation from, it'll benefit ACSD students more if we do have after school bus routes and that sort of thing. It's really hard for students in the surrounding towns to get to Middlebury. It really is an equity thing. Yeah.
Sorry.
I'm done.
Okay.
I'm done. I've talked almost not at all during the whole meeting, so.
I know.
Yeah.
I mean, we have a lease, and
Yeah.
That really does drive
Yeah.
a lot of this discussion, and we kind of have to keep that in mind, right? That we actually, many years ago, a decision probably before ACSD, to lease this land, right? So I guess the question I have, is this something that we can decide tonight? Steve?
To that end, all they're asking for is permission to use the site, and what we're talking about at this point is the whys and wherefores of how and when.
Yes.
And access of that kind. I don't think those can be worked out later. And I think it's kind of unfair to make these folks, have to address all of those concerns
Because that's not
right
their
now.
responsibility.
Right, I think that just approval to say that they could use this land, and to move forward might be something that we can do tonight. I would want to hear more information, and I would want to see more about how this is actually going to be implemented, but I don't think it's a bad idea, and I don't think we should hold up construction, my opinion, though.
Or fundraising.
Yeah, fundraising.
Right. So, would someone like to entertain a motion to,
I'll make the motion
okay, Chip,
that we have you sign a letter that the board okays that directs, I don't know how to phrase it, I guess it's. the
They
letter-
have a request of permission, a letter of permission
Yeah.
to construct a permanent concrete skate park at Recreation Park.
Can you forward your slides to your request slide?
The request of the board.
Make that motion,
There it is.
reflecting on everybody's opinions, but honestly, either it's gonna happen or it's not gonna happen. And if we find all sorts of ways that it shouldn't happen, that seems stupid to me. And so I just think it's better to forge ahead. If there is issues that everybody
So,
brought up, I'm not concerned about
let's
those.
do the
but-
motion and then we'll do
Okay.
discussion.
All right,
I'm sorry.
Discussing my motion.
Yes.
I'll
Sorry.
second the motion.
Okay,
Perfect.
now we can discuss it more. Sorry.
I picked up on that.
Yeah.
So I thank you, I'm sorry. I really think that it's much better to proceed with it. And if in fact, some of these things, social things, bad actors hanging out at the skate park, okay, that is disrupting people using it, that's up to the town to figure out how it works, okay? But for us to say we need more information, we're not gonna have more information to know whether that's gonna be the case or not. But you hear many of our concerns, which probably have come up in your own thinking. But I think the second guess where we should put it is just taking a lot of time, which is not, so that's mine.
And, my thinking is, this is a good motivation that we need to participate in the negotiation of the next lease, which is
Exactly.
expired.
Yeah.
And make sure that it's updated based on, this is 2023, a lot's happened in the district. And maybe even, for surrounding towns, that they, because it is on ACSD land, maybe we open it up so that kids from Shoreham and Bridport and other places could actually participate in some of the things there. But that's a town thing, that as we
Yeah.
negotiate.
We pay taxes on the recreation department, Cornwall does not.
Okay, well, so I guess that's,
I mean-
so we don't have to get into that.
That's where that's coming from.
Okay, any other discussion? Yes,
I would just underscore that, most of these issues are really lease agreement issues, and that's probably the most appropriate time for those considerations.
Yes. Okay, any other discussion? Hearing none, then I'd like to call the question that, now I have to remember what we said.
It's right there. It's right there.
Yeah.
Are we doing one, then this
Approve
next?
a letter of
Just one?
permission, to construct a skate park, at the proposed location in the recreation park. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say nay. Any abstentions?
I didn't see Jason.
Oh, we didn't see Jason. Sorry, Jason.
I voted in favor.
Okay, thank you. Actually, for hybrid meetings, what I learned that we're actually supposed to do a roll call vote. So at some point, we'll need to move to that, not tonight. Okay,
There's two
What about the
asks.
second?
The second
There's,
That's for the temporary mini
there's
grant.
also,
okay,
so
So-
can I make a motion?
so a motion for the second ask, which is, the temporary mini ramp
I'll second.
construction. Do I have a motion
I'll
on that
make
one?
the same motion.
Okay, Chip, a second?
Second.
Any discussion?
I guess, question, so it could be live and ready to go as soon as next month, and then it would be in that location until a concrete, so we are saying yes, go ahead and put something in for the foreseeable future.
Yes,
Yes.
with, I mean, yes, it can be disassembled. So if you decide, if a new lease agreement comes out and something changes, then I guess we would
Go from there.
tackle that at that point. Yeah.
Yeah, it's not a permit.
And gives
It would
us
be hard, but we could do it.
it gives us, so in some ways that gives us a trial run of seeing how it does go.
Yep, sure. Okay, any other discussion? Okay, all those in favor of approving the temporary mini ramp at the same location, respond by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed by nay? Any abstentions? Okay, it's been approved. Oh, Jason, I'm sorry.
No, he raised it high.
Awesome.
He raised it.
Thank
We
you.
can see that.
You get hidden behind this slide. Okay, thank you.
You're there now.
Thank you so
Thank
much.
you so
I won't let
much.
you down.
And you learned a lot about IV.
Okay, in lieu of time, is there any other reports of updates from any of the committees that we need to speak to tonight? Okay. If not, other is on the agenda before we move into executive session. Any other? I have a few things, but I'm just gonna send them an email.
Yep, good call.
Okay. All right, so then, what I'd like to do is, have us move into an executive session to talk about the interim superintendent search hiring process.
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, any abstentions? So we need to take a few minute break while our friend here is able to,